Welcome back to Required Reading, where we are continuing our read of Ghostbusters The Return, Chapter 8. So far, Antonia Salazar was having a pretty good day. Her supervisor, whom she affectionately referred to as the dipstick, had called in sick that morning. His bout of the flu cleared the way for a peaceful, relaxing day of personal phone calls and computerized solitaire. At precisely 11:30, she picked up her bag and headed out for a leisurely 2-hour lunch break. Not a second more than 2 hours, she promised herself. After all, she didn't want to take advantage. She waited a couple of minutes for the elevator, then descended the 7 floors to street level and stepped outside for the 4-block walk to her favorite deli. As usual, the walk took her right past the front entrance of City Hall. The scene outside it was far from typical, though. A long line of people stretched out of the entrance, down the steps, and all the way down the block, where it almost reached clear around the corner. Now what's this all about? She wondered. She continued to wonder about it as she walked along, making her way down the line. It wouldn't be tax day for ages yet. For that matter, it wasn't even the first of the month. If all these people weren't there to pay money, maybe City Hall was giving something away. Rebate checks, toasters, whatever it was, it looked like a lot of people wanted it. Of course, she could have satisfied her growing curiosity fairly easily by simply asking one of the people who were standing there. But she had a New Yorker's instinctive aversion to making eye contact, let alone conversation, with total strangers in the street. Besides, it seemed to her that some of the eclectic bunch of people standing in line put the strange back in stranger. Is that a possum on that guy's shoulder? She thought. Still, she continued to walk. More and more, she was becoming intrigued by the line of people. What if they were giving something away? Something really good? And she didn't find out until the next day, when she read the papers. What if it was too late by then, and she missed any chance she might have? As she fell deeper into thought, Antonia didn't notice that her pace was slowing. By the time she took a few more steps, she was standing still. Well, nothing ventured, nothing gained, she thought. She approached a nearby man who was wearing a turban and some sort of large amulet on a chain around his neck. "Excuse me. Hi," she said. He looked at her, but said nothing in reply. "I don't mean to bother you, but I was wondering, what's this all about?" He continued to stare silently. With a touch of discomfort, Antonia realized that he still hadn't blinked. "What's going on?" Without a word, he reached into his jacket and produced a sheet of newspaper. He extended it towards her. Hesitantly, Antonia took the newspaper from his hand. She smoothed it out to see that it was a full-page advertisement. It read, "Open call for exorcists. The mayor's office of the city of New York announces open auditions for qualified exorcists to be held 10 a.m. through 3 p.m. on Friday, September 13th at City Hall. Applications are encouraged from experienced psychics, shamans, necromancers, parapsychologists, mediums, astrologers, hooguns, mystics, occultists, investigators of the supernatural, and persons of the cloth. Salary and benefits to be commensurate with qualifications of the winning applicant. The mayor's office of the city of New York is an equal opportunity employer." "Oh," Antonia said. "Thanks." Because what else could she say? Gingerly, she handed the paper back to the man, who took it without a word. He folded the sheet neatly and returned it to the inside pocket of his jacket. Apparently the conversation was over. Antonia resumed her walk to the deli, although perhaps she walked a little more quickly now. She shook her head and thought, only in New York. The mayor sat in a small plain room at a heavy steel table that had probably been in the room since the Lindsay administration back in the 1960s. To one side of Lipinski sat his campaign manager, Nathan Wong. To the other side was the commissioner of New York's Office of Emergency Management. A tall but neat stack of applications lay at one end of the table, so that an aide could pass around the appropriate paperwork as each interviewer entered the room.
"Prepare yourselves, gentlemen," said the mayor.
"We've just sent an open invitation to every wacko, weirdo, and nutjob in New York City." "Heaven knows we've got no shortage of those," said the commissioner. "Still, let's keep an open mind. It could work," Wong said. "How hard could it be to find someone more effective than the Ghostbusters?"
"Well, we may as well get started,"
the mayor said to the others at the table. He called out to an aide who was stationed at the door.
"Send in the first applicant."
To be honest, Lipinski wasn't entirely sure what a prospective exorcist would look like. He assumed it would be either a pseudo-scientist like the Ghostbusters, or some kind of New Age mystical crystal-reading gypsy flake. The first applicant was a middle-aged woman dressed in numerous layers of colorful scarves and cloths. Her fingers and ears were adorned with rings of silver and gold, and her hair was tied back in yet another colorful patterned scarf.
"Well, at least she looks the part," thought Lipinski.
The aide passed copies of an application to the men at the table. The mayor looked at the name at the top of the page.
"Madame Elena."
"Madame Elena,"
she confirmed in a rich, thick European accent.
"Madame Elena sees all, tells all. Madame Elena holds the power to help with all of life's problems. Visa and MasterCard accepted."
"What's your background?"
She held out her hand.
"Cross my palm with silver, and all your questions will be answered."
"What?"
asked the mayor. He couldn't possibly have heard her correctly.
"Cross my palm with silver, and all your questions will be answered,"
she repeated.
"You're not serious,"
said Lipinski. She nodded again. You do know this is an audition, don't you?" said the commissioner. Her hand was still extended. "Well, traditionally, people ask questions in auditions." She nodded again. "And, they don't usually pay for the answers. Not, usually." She nodded. The men at the table looked at each other, not sure where to go from there. The request had taken them completely by surprise, and they didn't quite know what to say. Finally, Wong spoke up. "You know what?" he said. "If it'll speed things up." He pulled a $5 bill from his pocket and handed it to her.
"Thank you,"
she said with a bow. By the time she stood up straight again, the $5 had disappeared somewhere into her clothes. The mayor shuffled his papers, buying himself time to regain his composure. Clearly, he'd lost control of the situation for a moment, and it was time to take back the driver's seat.
"Okay, you got your money. Fine. Now, what's your background?"
Madame Elena gestured broadly as she launched into her tale.
"I was born beneath the moon in the hills of Romania. The wolf howled and the wind sang with the voices of the spirits on a late summer's night. My mother cried out from her caravan."
Yes,
said Lipinski, with more than a little impatience in his voice.
"Let's cut to the present. What techniques do you use to deal with ghosts?"
Madame Elena held out her hand.
"Cross my palm with silver, and all your questions will be answered."
Once again, the room was silent as everyone checked to make sure they'd heard correctly. The mayor was aghast.
But we already did that. You said you'd answer all our questions."
Madame Elena held up her index finger.
$5 crosses only one of my fingers. Another question, another $5.
That did it,
You're supposed to be psychic, right?
said the mayor. Madame Elena nodded.
So tell me what I'm thinking.
Madame Elena stared deeply into his eyes. Then her lip curled in disgust.
You should be ashamed of yourself, she said.
Wong breathed deeply as he tossed the application on the pile. Well, that's the last of them. When they started, none of the three men had fully appreciated just how grueling the process would be. But after 7 hours, a full 2 hours longer than they stated in the ad, and well over 100 applicants, they most definitely understood it now. Their ties had come off after the second hour, and their jackets followed not long after. They'd lost count of the cups of coffee they'd consumed, and by now, the only thing that each of them really wanted was a good stiff drink. And the thing was, it was all for nothing. An endless parade of paranormal misfits, and there wasn't a single decent candidate in the bunch. The mayor ran his hand through what was left of his thinning hair.
So,
He said, leaning forward to rest his head on his hands.
what do we do now?
They were quiet for a bit. I guess we could try launching an intensive supernatural training course for existing emergency services personnel, offered the commissioner. Maybe we could create some sort of paranormal SWAT team. Would that work? Asked Wong. I don't know. Maybe, said the commissioner.
And who would run this intensive training of yours?
Asked Lipinski. The commissioner pondered that for a moment. It wasn't a standard training course that was likely to be offered in another state, nor had he come across a lot of potential instructors today. Finally, with a shrug, he said, The Ghostbusters? Lipinski shot him a look that ended the discussion. It's always possible, said Wong, that there won't be any more ghost attacks between now and Election Day. That would negate the whole issue. It'd be a moot point.
After everything that's happened in the past week, said Lipinski, that sounds like an awfully big long shot.
Thy pardon, good fellows, I pray thee a moment of thy time.
As one, they looked towards the door to see the source of a deep rumbling voice. Lipinski almost gasped. The figure that filled the door stood at least 6.5 feet tall, with a massive build that could have been sculpted out of rock, and a hat that lent almost an additional foot to his height. On anyone else, his archaic Puritan garb would have looked out of place, or even comical, but on him, it looked as natural as his stern, craggy face and graying beard. As distinctive as all that might have been, though, the feature that stood out the most was his eyes. They were as black as the darkest night, but seemed to burn with a nameless, unyielding force. The mayor wasn't used to feeling intimidated. He was usually the one doing the intimidating. But the new arrival's mere gaze sent a chill through him, piercing straight through like an arrow. No, like an 8-foot-long spear. Suddenly, Lipinski felt like he was back in the 3rd grade, withering beneath the stare of Sister Teresa when she could tell he'd done something wrong, even if he didn't remember doing anything wrong himself. The Puritan crossed the room in long strides, coming to a halt before the table.
I am given to understand that thou art in need of a champion to smite the unholy hordes of darkness that do plague thy city.
With some effort, the mayor managed to stammer out,
And you are?
Goodraven, Jonathan Goodraven, at thy service.
You're an exorcist?
I have been honored to do the Lord's work for lo these many years.
As he spoke, his sonorous voice rose, becoming even deeper and more resounding. It seemed to shake the very walls themselves.
Though the forces of evil are legion, they are but chaff before the light of glory. The Devil of Windsor, the Bloody Coven of Knightsbridge, the Banshee of Schenectady, all have fallen midst blood and fury at my hands. As they have shown no mercy, so too have I given no quarter. One and all they have found themselves cast back to the sulphurous pits of Gehenna that spawned them.
How do you do that exactly? Cast them back into the pits, I mean.
I have been known to employ means both mystical and mundane. Some might confine themselves to their personal tried and true, but I have found greater success in pursuing whatever path might prove most expeditious to the matter at hand. I must confess that I have had little use for niceties. However, the results of my handiwork have yet to provoke complaint.
Lipinski felt as though he'd just fallen in love. Now this was an exorcist. And not just that. Goodraven sounded like an exorcist after his own heart, to boot. He cast an odd, inquisitive glance to either side. Wong and the commissioner were looking back at him with slack jaws. Each of them managed just the faintest of nods in reply. Not that it mattered much. Even if they hadn't agreed, the mayor's mind was made up. He rose to his feet and extended a hand over the table. Goodraven enveloped his hand in a powerful, bone-crushing grip.
Mr. Goodraven, he said, on behalf of the city of New York, I'd like to offer you a job.